I ironed my good blouse the night before, the cream one with the small buttons at the collar that my sister gave me years ago. I hadn't worn it in almost 2 years, but I wanted to look nice. I wanted my son to see me and think, she looks good. I wanted to feel like myself again. My son called me on a Tuesday evening in late October. I was sitting in my kitchen in Raleigh with the news on low and a cup of chamomile going cold on the counter. The phone lit up and I saw his name and I smiled before I even answered. "Mom," he said. He sounded warm, happy even. "Thanksgiving is in 3 weeks. We want you here this year. Aubrey and I talked about it and we want to do it right. The whole thing. Turkey, the works. The kids want to see you." I hadn't been to his house for Thanksgiving in 4 years. The first year was COVID. The second year, he said they were going to her parents in Phoenix. The third year, I was told the house was being renovated and there wasn't a good guest space set up yet. Last year, he didn't mention the holiday at all until I called him on the Wednesday before, and he said, "Oh, Mom, I thought you had plans." I didn't have plans. I ate a microwave soup and watched the parade on television by myself. So when he called in October and said, "We want you here," I believed him. Of course I believed him. He's my son. "I'll drive up," I said. "I don't mind the drive." "Are you sure?" "It's almost 6 hours. I've made that drive before. I'll leave early, stop for coffee. I'll be there by noon." He sounded relieved. That should have told me something, looking back. A person who genuinely wants you to come isn't relieved when you say yes. They're happy. There's a difference. I spent the next 3 weeks looking forward to it in a way I hadn't looked forward to anything in a long time. I bought a new centerpiece for the table, a small thing, gourds and dried eucalyptus, the kind you see in those home magazines. I thought maybe I could help set the table, do something useful. I made my grandmother's cranberry walnut bread the day before because it needs time to cool properly. I wrapped it in parchment and put it in a basket with a dish towel over the top. The way my mother used to do it. I packed my bag the night before, the cream blouse, my good gray cardigan, the earrings my late husband gave me for our 40th anniversary. Small pearl drops, nothing fancy, but I wear them when I want to feel like someone who matters. I left Raleigh at 6 in the morning. It was still dark and the roads were empty, and I had a travel mug of coffee and a podcast going. And honestly, for those first 2 hours, I felt light. I felt like a person who was going somewhere she was wanted. I stopped at a rest area outside of Greensboro, stretched my legs, used the restroom, bought a bottle of water. A woman about my age was walking a small terrier near the grass. We nodded at each other. I thought, I wonder if she's going to family too. I got back in the car and I drove. My son and his wife live outside of Charlotte in a subdivision called Whitmore Glen. Nice houses, 2-car garages, those Ring doorbells on every front door. They've lived there for 6 years. I visited twice. Once for my grandson Cody's 6th birthday, and once when my daughter-in-law Aubrey had a minor surgery and my son asked me to come help with the kids for a few days. I did that without being asked twice. I drove up, stayed in the guest room, made breakfast every morning, took the kids to school. I didn't complain. I'm not saying I expected something in return. I'm just saying I thought we had an understanding. I pulled off the highway a little after noon. I texted my son from a gas station 2 miles from the house. Almost there, about 5 minutes away. I waited a minute, 2 minutes. I pulled back onto the road. I turned onto their street. I could see their house at the end of the cul-de-sac, the gray one with the black shutters and the basketball hoop at the end of the driveway. There were cars I didn't recognize parked along the curb. 4 of them. I thought, oh, they must have invited other people. I remember thinking that was fine. The more the merrier. I was just glad to be included. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment. I took a breath. I smoothed down the front of my blouse. I picked up the basket with the cranberry bread, and I walked to the front door. I rang the bell. I could hear voices inside. Laughter, music, something with a lot of bass that I didn't recognize. Kids running, normal holiday sounds. My chest felt warm just hearing it. Nobody came. I waited. I rang the bell again. The door opened and it was my daughter-in-law Aubrey. She was wearing an apron and holding a glass of white wine, and she had that particular look on her face. Not unfriendly exactly, but surprised in a way that landed wrong. The kind of surprise that isn't happy. "Oh," she said. You're here. Not you made it. Not come in, we've been waiting. Just you're here. I'm here, I said. I held up the basket. I made the cranberry bread. She took the basket from me without looking at it. Come in, she said, and turned back toward the kitchen before I'd even crossed the threshold. The house was full of people, her sister and brother-in-law, her parents, her father in a recliner in the living room like he owned the place. Two of her cousins I'd met once at their wedding 8 years ago, a few people I didn't know at all. Kids everywhere. I stood in the entryway for a moment. Nobody came to greet me. My son came out of the kitchen holding a dish towel, and when he saw me, he looked. And I know this sounds like something a person says when they're being dramatic, but I need you to understand I'm not being dramatic. He looked like he'd forgotten I was coming. Mom, he said. Hey, you made good time. He hugged me. A quick hug. The kind you give someone you see every week. Then he went back to the kitchen. I found a spot on the couch. Her mother patted my hand and said, "So good you could make it," in the same tone you'd use to someone you'd just met at a church potluck. Her father didn't get up from the recliner. The cousins were deep in a conversation about something on their phones. Nobody asked about my drive. Nobody offered me anything to drink for the first 20 minutes I sat there. I got up and got myself a glass of water from the kitchen. The table was set for, I counted the chairs, 11 people. I looked at the name cards Aubrey had made. Little folded cardstock, everyone's name in her handwriting. I found mine. I was at the far end, between one of the cousins I didn't know and an empty chair. Her parents were at the center of the table, on either side of my son and daughter-in-law. The kids had their own little folding table in the corner. I stood there looking at that table for a long moment. Then I went to the bathroom and closed the door and stood over the sink, and I breathed. I told myself, you are here. Your grandchildren are here. That's enough. Be grateful. I washed my hands. I straightened my earrings in the mirror. I went back out. Dinner was at 3. The turkey was good. Aubrey is a good cook. I'll give her that, honestly. My cranberry bread was on the table, but nobody mentioned where it came from, and when her sister asked what it was, Aubrey said, "Oh, that's something from the store," and I was too tired to correct it. My grandson, Cody, sat at the kids' table. He's 10 now. He looked over at me once during dinner and waved, and I waved back, and that was, genuinely, the best moment of the afternoon. After dinner, the men went to watch football. The women cleaned up. I offered to help, and Aubrey's mother took over the kitchen in a way that made it clear she considered it her territory. So I stood near the counter handing dish towels to whoever needed one and feeling like a hotel guest who'd arrived on the wrong weekend. By 5 o'clock, I was sitting in the living room while a football game played on a television so large it takes up most of the wall, and I realized I had not had a single real conversation with my son since I arrived. I found him in the kitchen getting a beer. "Can we talk for a minute?" I said. He looked at me, not unkindly, but with that faint impatience that I've learned to recognize over the years. The look that means, "What now?" "Sure, Mom. What's up?" I didn't know how to start, so I just said it plainly. "I feel a little invisible today." He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Mom, we're hosting a lot of people. It's been a crazy day. I drove 6 hours. I know you did, and I appreciate that. I just thought." I stopped. I thought what? That he'd save me a seat at the center of the table? That someone would ask how I was doing? That my cranberry bread wouldn't be passed off as something from a store? "Mom." His voice was patient in that way that isn't actually patient. "You're always welcome here." But Aubrey's family came from Phoenix. It's a long trip for them, too. Phoenix. They flew 2 hours and got the center of the table. I drove 6 hours and got the folding chair next to a stranger. I didn't say that. I said, "Okay," and went back to the living room. I left at 6:30. I told everyone it was a long drive and I wanted to be home before it got too late. Cody hugged me at the door, really hugged me. A good solid kid hug, and I held on a little longer than I should have. Aubrey said, "Safe travels." Her mother said, "So nice to finally meet you properly," which I suppose confirmed that she'd had no idea who I was before that afternoon. My son walked me to my car. He said he loved me. I said I loved him too. I meant it. I always mean it. I drove out of Whitmore Glen in the dark and I got back on the highway, and somewhere around exit 58, I started crying. Not the dramatic kind, just the quiet kind. The kind that sneaks up on you when you've been holding your jaw tight all day. I cried for about 20 minutes and then I stopped. I turned up the radio. I drove the rest of the way home. I got back to Raleigh at 12:40 in the morning. I put my bag down by the door and I sat at my kitchen table in my coat and I looked at the room around me, the one I've lived in for 31 years, the one I raised 2 children in, the one I nursed my husband through his last months in. And I thought about what I had done to deserve to feel like a burden. I thought about a lot of things that night. I thought about the $400 I send my son every month. I started doing it 3 years ago when he and Aubrey bought the house and he mentioned, quietly, that the mortgage payments were tight. Just until things settle, he said. Things settled a long time ago. I kept sending it. I thought about the weeks I spent at their house when Aubrey had her surgery. How I drove up without being asked a second time. How I slept on the pull-out couch because the guest room was being used for storage. How I took the kids to school and picked them up and made dinner every night and never once asked for a thank you. I thought about the last 4 Thanksgivings. The COVID year, fine, that was everyone. The Phoenix year, fine. Families rotate. The renovation year. And last year, when he didn't call until I called first and he said, "Oh, I thought you had plans." I sat at my kitchen table until 2 in the morning. Then I went to bed. I didn't call my son the next day. I didn't call him the day after that either. He didn't call me. That told me something I hadn't wanted to admit. I already knew. About a week later, I called my financial advisor. Her name is Rosemary. She's been my advisor since my husband passed, and she's good at her job and doesn't treat me like I'm frail. I told her I wanted to stop the monthly transfer to my son's account. She didn't ask questions, just confirmed the amount and the effective date. She said, "Consider it done." I also made an appointment with my attorney. I'm 67 years old and I have a will that I drafted right after my husband died. It was written with certain assumptions in mind. Assumptions about who would be there for me, who I could count on. I sat down with my attorney and we talked for an hour. She asked good questions. I gave honest answers. I'm not going to describe every change I made. Some things are private. But I will tell you that when I walked out of her office, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while. I felt like a woman who had taken care of herself. That's not nothing. At 67, after a long marriage and a grief and a life spent taking care of other people, feeling like you've taken care of yourself is something. My son noticed the missing transfer about 3 weeks after I stopped it. He texted me, "Hey mom, did something happen with the account? I didn't get the usual this month." I texted back, "Yes, I decided to stop that. I need to be more careful with my own money." He called 20 minutes later. The conversation was short. "Is everything okay? Are you having financial trouble?" "No," I said. "I'm fine." "Then why?" "I've been thinking about my expenses. I think it's time I took better care of my own future." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is this about Thanksgiving?" I thought about how to answer that. I thought about the folding chair next to a stranger. I thought about something from the store. I thought about exit 58 in the dark. "It's about a lot of things," I said, "but mostly it's about me." He didn't know what to do with that. My son is a good person. I do believe that down to my bones, but he was raised to expect that love flows in one direction, and the realization that it might stop flowing that way is genuinely disorienting for him. I understand that. I'm his mother. I understand him better than he understands himself. That's not bitterness. It's just true. We talked for another few minutes. He said he was sorry I felt invisible. I said thank you. He said they should plan something soon, just the two of us. I said that would be nice. I meant it cautiously. I don't know if he told Aubrey. I suspect he did. She texted me a recipe for cranberry bread 2 weeks later with a note that said, "Thought you might like this." I didn't respond to that. Here is something I want to tell you because I think it matters. In the weeks after Thanksgiving, I started going to a watercolor class at the community center on Tuesday evenings. I'd been meaning to go for 2 years and just hadn't gotten around to it. It's 2 hours. A small room, 8 or 10 people. Most of them are tired. Nobody's very good. That's the point. The woman who sits next to me is named Vivienne. She's 71, and she's one of those people who is purely, uncomplicatedly kind in a way that doesn't feel like performance. She asked me my name on the first evening and remembered it the next week and the week after that. We've started getting decaf afterward at the diner across the street. Last week she said to me, "You seem like someone who's been carrying something for a long time and just recently put it down." I thought about that for a moment. "That's about right," I said. "Good," she said, and we drank our decaf and talked about the still life arrangement we were going to attempt next week. A glass bottle, and an apple, and a cloth. And it was so ordinary and so pleasant that I had to remind myself this was my actual life, not something I was waiting for. This, my daughter. I haven't talked about my daughter yet. Her name is Pauline, and she lives in Vermont with her husband and their 2 teenagers and a dog named Biscuit, who has destroyed 3 couches. Pauline calls me every Sunday. Not always for long, but she calls. She called me the Sunday after Thanksgiving and listened to the whole story, and at the end she said, "Mom, you should have called me on the drive home." "I know," I said. "You should have called and I would have talked to you the whole way." "I know, honey." She was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay?" "I'm getting there," I said. "I think I'm getting there." She came to visit me in January. She booked the flight herself, didn't ask me to help with the ticket, showed up at my door with Biscuit, who is enormous and well-meaning, and knocked over my lamp, and we spent 4 days just being in the same house. We made soup. We watched old movies. We walked around the neighborhood in the cold with the dog pulling at the leash. She slept in the actual guest room, which I keep made up with clean sheets because that's the kind of person I am. On the last morning before she left, she said, "I know I'm not enough to make up for it." I looked at her. "Make up for what?" "For him. For how they treat you." I shook my head. "You're not making up for anything. You're just you. That's more than enough." She hugged me for a long time at the door. I still love my son. I want to say that clearly, because I think sometimes when women my age tell stories like this, people assume we've turned cold or bitter or we're playing some kind of long game. I'm not. I love him. I miss who I thought we were to each other. I'm grieving something, even now, even as I feel clearer than I have in years. But I've learned, slowly, later in life than I should have, that love without reciprocity is not a relationship. It's a donation. And I spent too many years making donations without asking whether anyone was even using what I gave. My checkbook stays with me now. My future stays with me. The good blouse hangs in my closet, and I wear it when I feel like it, not when I'm trying to earn my place at someone's table. I signed up for a second watercolor class, the intermediate one on Thursday mornings. Vivienne is in that one too. We're learning to paint loose florals. Mine look like weather events. Hers look like actual flowers. She says that's what makes it interesting. Last Thursday, walking out to the parking lot, she said, "Same time next week?" And just like that, just that quietly, I said yes. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that Thanksgiving. Not in any grand philosophical way, just quietly, the way you do when you're sitting at your kitchen table at 2 in the morning trying to make sense of a day that left you feeling like a stranger in your own son's house. Here's what I've come to understand. The things we allow to continue are the things that continue. That's not a judgment. It's just what's true. For years, I sent that money every month. For years, I drove up when asked, slept on the pull-out couch, made breakfast, did the school runs, never once said, "This doesn't feel balanced." I told myself that's what love looks like. And it is. Love does look like showing up, like giving without keeping score. But there's a version of that that slides, slowly and without you noticing, into something else, into an arrangement, into being taken for granted so completely that the person on the other end forgets to even wonder whether you're okay. My son didn't do this out of cruelty. I want to be clear about that. He did it out of a kind of carelessness that gets easier the longer it goes uncorrected. Every time I didn't say anything, I was teaching him that there was nothing to say, That's on me as much as it's on him. That's the part that kept me up that night. Not just what he did, but what I had quietly permitted for so long. The cranberry bread thing. I keep coming back to that small, stupid thing. I made it the day before. I wrapped it the way my mother used to. I carried it 6 hours in a basket with a dish towel over the top, and it became something from the store. I don't think Aubrey did that to wound me. I think she did it because she genuinely hadn't thought much about it. Because that's what happens when someone has been in the background long enough. They stop being a person with a history and a mother and a recipe she learned at age 12. They become furniture. You can't demand your way out of that. You can't explain your way out of it. The only way out is to quietly, without drama, stop making yourself so easy to overlook. That's what stopping the money was. That's what the attorney appointment was. Not revenge. I want to be honest about that. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like finally deciding that my future deserved the same care I'd been giving everyone else's. Vivian asked me once, over decaf at the diner, whether I was angry. I thought about it for a real minute before I answered. Less than I expected to be, I said. Mostly I'm just tired of shrinking. She nodded. She understood that. What I've learned, slowly and later than I should have, is that dignity is not something other people hand you. You carry it yourself, or you don't have it. Pauline calling every Sunday is dignity. Vivienne remembering my name the second week is dignity. The watercolor class where nobody's very good, and that's the whole point. That's dignity too. Small things. But they're mine. And I chose them. I'm 67 years old. I have, if I'm fortunate, good decades still ahead of me. I intend to spend them among people who are genuinely glad I'm in the room, not people I have to earn my place with, not tables where I'm seated at the far end next to someone who doesn't know my name. My son and I still talk. We're finding our way. It's slower and more careful than before, which I think is actually healthier. Real things usually are.